The silence on the bridge of the Aethelgard was heavy and thick. It was the kind of silence that only existed in the deepest parts of space, far away from any busy planets or shipping lanes. Outside the windows, there was nothing but the darkness of the void and the distant, cold light of stars that had died 1,000,000 years ago. Roy sat in the pilot's chair, leaning back with his feet resting on the edge of the console. He was bored. He was very, very bored. For 3 weeks, the Aethelgard had been moving through the sector known as the Dead Zone. It was a place on the edge of the galactic chart that no one visited. There were no stations here, no mines, and no life. Just dust and old rocks. "Status report," a voice said from behind him. Roy didn't jump. He knew that voice well. He took his feet off the console and sat up straight. Captain Grace walked onto the bridge. She looked calm as always, holding a cup of hot coffee in her hand. She was a woman who did not raise her voice often, but when she spoke, everyone listened. "Nothing is happening, Captain," Roy said with a small sigh. "Sensors are clear. Long-range scanners are picking up dust. No radio signals. No gravity wells. We are alone." Grace took a sip of her coffee and looked at the main screen. "That is the job, Roy. We are mapping. We are not here to find excitement. We are here to make sure this area is safe for future travel." I know, Roy muttered. "But a little bit of action wouldn't hurt. Just a small comet. Or a weird signal. Anything to break the boredom." From the science station in the corner, a man named Thomas laughed softly. Thomas was the smartest person on the ship, maybe the smartest person Roy had ever met. He was always looking at screens full of numbers and data. "Be careful what you wish for," Thomas said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Space usually listens, and when it does, it is rarely fun." Grace walked over to the center of the room and stood with her hands behind her back. "Keep the scanners running. We are nearing the edge of the chart. In a few hours, we will turn around and head back to the station." Roy nodded and tapped a few buttons on his panel. The ship hummed quietly. It was a good sound. It meant the engine was working perfectly. But as Roy looked at the radar screen, a small red light blinked. He frowned. He tapped the screen. "Hey, Thomas, is this a glitch?" Thomas turned his chair around. "What is it?" "I have a ghost reading on the radar," Roy said. "Something big. But it's not there 1 second, and then it is the next." Thomas typed on his keyboard quickly. "I am checking. Wait, I have it too. It is massive. It is not a rock. It has a structure." Suddenly, the ship shook violently. Roy grabbed the control stick to keep them steady. The coffee in Grace's cup spilled onto the floor. Alarm sirens began to scream inside the bridge. The red lights flashed, making the room look like a nightmare. "Report," Grace shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "Proximity alert," Roy yelled, looking at the main view screen. Something just appeared right in front of us. It dropped out of nowhere. On the screen, the darkness of space was suddenly blocked. A giant ship was floating there. It was ugly and jagged, like a knife made of black iron. It was huge, much bigger than the Aethelgard. It looked dangerous and deadly. "Identify the ship," Grace ordered. Her face hard. Thomas was typing fast, his fingers a blur. "I am running the database." "Captain, that is a Vykeen dreadnought. The design matches the warships from the core systems." Roy felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The Vykeen Empire was the strongest power in the galaxy. They were bullies. They hated humans. They thought humans were like ants, small, weak, and stupid. If a Vykeen ship was here, it was bad news. "Are they hailing us?" Grace asked. "Incoming transmission," Thomas said. "Audio and video. Put it on the screen." The main screen flickered and changed. Instead of the view of the stars, the face of an alien appeared. He had gray skin, sharp teeth, and eyes full of hate. He wore heavy armor and looked at the humans as if they were dirt. This was Overseer Vex. Human vessel, Vex hissed. His voice sounded like metal scraping on stone. You have trespassed into holy ground. Grace stepped forward. I am Captain Grace of the Earthship Aethelgard. We are on a scientific mission. We are in international space. We are leaving. Vex laughed. It was a cruel sound. You are nowhere near your tiny planet, human. You are at the edge of the galactic chart. This sector belongs to the Vykeen Empire. It is forbidden to lesser species like yours. We did not know, Grace said calmly. We are turning around now. No, Vex said. You are not. You are primitives. You crawl out of your mud and think you can explore the stars. You are an insult to the galaxy. Rui gripped the controls tight. He could feel his heart beating fast. Captain, their weapons are powering up, he warned. They have a lock on us. Silence, vermin. Vex snapped, looking at Roy. Then he looked back at Grace. I will give you one mercy. I will not take you as slaves. I will simply destroy you. It will be quick. Grace looked at Thomas. She gave him a small, almost invisible nod. Then she looked back at the screen. Vex, do not do this. We are not defenseless. You are nothing, Vex sneered. Your technology is a joke. Your ships are made of tin. Prepare to die. The alien commander made a gesture to someone off-screen. On the bridge of the Aethelgard, the alarm for incoming fire began to scream. Evasion patterns. Grace shouted. Roy, get us out of here. I can't. Roy yelled, his hands flying over the controls. They have a tractor beam. We are stuck. Thomas looked at his screen. Captain, the energy spike from their main cannon is critical. If they fire, we will be vaporized. We have seconds. Grace did not panic. She looked at the alien face on the screen. Vex was smiling. He thought he had already won. He thought he was killing a bug. Thomas, Grace said, her voice low. You know what to do. Thomas stopped typing on the main keyboard. He reached under his console and pulled out a small black drive. It looked old and scratched. He plugged it into a port that had never been used before. Initiating protocol, Thomas said. On the screen, Vex frowned. What are you doing, human? Trying to beg? It is too late. We are not begging, Grace said. We are calculating. Fire! Vex roared. The Vykeen ship began to glow bright green as it prepared to fire its main weapon. Roy squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the end. But the laser did not fire. Instead, the Aethelgard began to hum. It was a sound Roy felt in his teeth, a low vibration that shook his bones. Open the channel, Grace commanded. Let him see it. Thomas pressed the button. Channel open. What is this noise? Vex yelled, looking confused. Destroy them. The view screen changed. The image of the angry alien was replaced by a complex three-dimensional model of the Vykeen ship itself. It was spinning slowly, covered in thousands of red numbers and symbols. Target locked, Thomas said softly. Roy opened his eyes. He looked at the screen. He did not understand the math, but he could see the fear in Vex's eyes when the alien looked at the data. What is that? Vex whispered. That, Grace said, is your future. The green glow from the Vykeen ship's main cannon grew brighter, illuminating the dark bridge of the Aethelgard with an eerie light. The hum of the energy weapon was audible even through the thick hull of the human ship. It was a sound of impending death. Overseer Vex's face twisted into a triumphant snarl on the view screen. He believed the battle was already over. To him, the humans were just pests waiting to be crushed. Shields are at 5%, Roy shouted. his knuckles white as he gripped the control stick. "Captain, if that cannon fires, we won't just be damaged. We will be dust. I can't break the tractor beam." He pushed the throttle forward, trying to force the engines to give more power, but the ship groaned in protest. The invisible grip from the alien dreadnought held them firm. They were a fish caught on a hook, waiting for the fisherman to strike. Grace stood in the center of the chaos, motionless. She did not look at the flashing red lights or the warning sirens. She only looked at Thomas. The lead scientist was hunched over his console, typing commands into the black drive he had just plugged in. His fingers moved with a speed that seemed impossible, a blur of motion across the keys. "Thomas," Grace said, her voice calm and steady. "Status." "I am inside their frequency," Thomas replied, not looking up. "The Vykeen use a primitive encryption algorithm for their tractor beam. It is based on a geometric prime number. It is child's play to unravel." On the main screen, Vex seemed confused by the lack of screaming from the humans. "Why do you not beg?" He roared, "Fire! Destroy them now." The energy on the alien ship peaked. The moment of destruction was seconds away. "Thomas," Grace warned. "Got it," Thomas said. He slammed his hand down on the enter key. Suddenly, the view on the main screen shifted. The snarling face of Overseer Vex vanished, replaced by a wireframe model of the massive alien ship. It was rotating slowly, covered in complex equations and flowing red lines of data. It looked like a blueprint of a living machine. "What is this trickery?" Vex's voice boomed over the speakers, sounding less confident now. "Stop that display." "I am not touching your display screen, Overseer," Grace said, stepping closer to the camera so the alien could see her face. "I am touching your ship." "Don't listen to her." Vex screamed at his own crew. "Fire." But the cannon did not fire. The green light flickered and died. The Aethelgard shook once, hard, and then the heavy pressure in the air vanished. The tractor beam was gone. "Report," Grace ordered. "Your systems are in a reset loop," Thomas said, a small smile playing on his lips. "I just fed them a logic bomb through the tractor beam carrier frequency. While they are rebooting, I have full access to their sensor logs and their structural schematics." Roy felt the ship lurch free. He quickly pulled back on the stick, putting some distance between them and the giant alien vessel. "We are free, Captain. But their weapons are coming back online in 30 seconds. We need to jump to hyperspace or shoot back." Grace ignored him. "Thomas, initiate the calculation. Find the resonance point." "I'm already on it," Thomas said. He was sweating now. "We are in a sector of space with a high concentration of dark matter. It affects the gravitational constant. Most races navigate around it because their sensors get confused. But we don't navigate around it. We use it." On the screen, the wireframe model of the Vykeen ship began to pulse. Thousands of numbers scrolled down the side of the display. "Look at that," Thomas whispered. "Their hull plating is made of a super-dense alloy. Very strong, very durable. But it has a fatal flaw." "Explain," Grace said. "Everything in the universe vibrates," Thomas said, speaking fast as if he was reciting a lecture. "From the smallest atom to the largest star. Most civilizations build their ships to withstand physical impact, lasers, missiles, rocks. They build thick walls. But they never consider the vibration of the walls themselves." Roy looked back at them, confused. "Thomas, I don't understand." "What are you talking about?" "I found the frequency," Thomas said. "Every material has a natural frequency where it shakes itself apart. If you hit a glass with the right sound, it breaks. If you hit this Vykeen ship with the right sound, it will turn into liquid. Can we do that?" Roy asked. "We don't have a sound gun. We have the quantum drive," Thomas said. And we have the math. Grace nodded. Do it. Overseer Vex's face reappeared on the screen. He looked angry now, purple veins bulging on his forehead. You managed to disrupt our beam? Clever little monkeys. But now you die. Weapons are hot. Target the human ship. Captain, they are locking on, Roy yelled. Hold position, Roy, Grace commanded. Hold position? They are going to blow us up. Hold position, Grace repeated. Her voice was like iron. Trust the science. Thomas typed the final sequence. The black drive whined as it processed the data. A new target reticle appeared on Roy's screen. It wasn't aiming at the ship's engines or the bridge. It was aiming at the empty space right next to the alien hull. What is the target? Roy asked, staring at the empty space. Fire the pulse emitter, Thomas said. Not the torpedoes. The emitter? The emitter? Roy asked. That's just for communication. It won't scratch their paint. Do it. Grace and Thomas shouted together. Roy pushed the slider for the pulse emitter. He expected a weak beep. Instead, the Aethelgard gave a massive shudder that knocked Roy's teeth together. A wave of invisible distortion shot out from the human ship. It wasn't the laser beam. It wasn't the solid projectile. It was a ripple in the air, a distortion of gravity that moved silently through the vacuum dot it hit the Vykeen ship. On the screen, Overseer Vex was laughing. Was that your weapon? A radio wave? You are pathetic. But then, the alien ship began to hum. The sound was low, too low for human ears to hear, but the bridge crew could feel it in their chests. The view screen zoomed in on the enemy hull. The resonance, Thomas whispered. It's starting. Vex stopped laughing. He looked around his own bridge, confused. Why is the deck shaking? He asked his crew. Report. Outside, the impossible began to happen. The massive black metal plates of the Vykeen dreadnought began to wobble. At first, it looked like a mirage, a blur in the air. But then, rivets popped. Huge metal bolts, the size of cars, shot out of the hull as if the ship was exploding from the inside. Roy watched in horror. What is happening to them? Their atomic bonds are breaking down, Thomas said, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. The frequency is making their atoms repel each other. The metal can't hold its shape anymore. The Vykeen ship, a symbol of power and terror in the galaxy, started to droop. It looked like a candle left in the hot sun. The heavy gun turrets melted off the hull and floated away. The thick armor plating turned into silver sludge. Stop it! Vex screamed on the screen, grabbing his own head as the vibration rattled his brain. Make it stop. What are you doing? Grace watched the screen with cold eyes. You wanted to see our technology, Overseer. You are looking at it. The ship groaned so loudly that Roy had to cover his ears. The spine of the alien vessel, a beam of metal as thick as a skyscraper, snapped with a sound like a thunderclap. The Vykeen ship did not explode in a fireball. It simply crumpled. It folded in on itself, collapsing into a ball of molten metal and debris. Target destroyed, Thomas said softly. The Aethelgard drifted silently in the dark. In front of them, where a deadly warship had been moments ago, there was now only a cloud of glittering dust and cooling metal. The silence of space returned, but it was no longer boring. It was terrifying. Roy slumped back in his chair, breathing hard. We didn't even fire a shot, he whispered. We just sang a song at them. Not a song, Thomas said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Just a correction. Just a correction. Grace took a deep breath and turned to the crew. Good work, but don't celebrate yet. That pulse was loud. I guarantee you, we are not the only ones who heard it. The bridge of the Aethelgard was plunged into a heavy silence that felt louder than the explosion that had just occurred. Outside the massive observation windows, The terrifying Vykeen dreadnought was gone. In its place was a slowly expanding cloud of glittering debris. The superweapon that had threatened them only moments ago was now nothing more than floating dust. Cooling rapidly in the chill of space, Roy sat in his pilot's chair, his hands still hovering over the controls, shaking slightly. He stared at the dust cloud, unable to process what he had just seen. He had expected fire, lasers, and a brave last stand. He had not expected to watch a miles-long starship crumple like a piece of wet paper. Is it gone? Roy asked, his voice barely a whisper. Thomas was slumped over his console, breathing hard as if he had just run a marathon. He wiped a layer of sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. It is gone, he confirmed. Structural integrity failed. The resonance wave shattered their hull at the molecular level. They didn't explode. They just fell apart. Grace stood near the center of the room, her back straight and her face calm. She sipped the last of her coffee, which had now gone cold, but she did not seem to care. She watched the swirling debris on the main screen with eyes that betrayed no emotion. "Scan the wreckage," she ordered, her voice steady. "I want to confirm there are no survivors." Thomas nodded and tapped a few keys. "Scanning. No life signs, Captain." The resonance destroyed the organic matter as easily as the metal. It was quick. They didn't feel a thing. Roy let out a long breath he did not know he was holding. That was insane. One button. I pushed one button, and that ship, a ship that could have wiped out a planet, just turned into liquid. "It wasn't just a button, Roy," Thomas said, looking up from his screen. His eyes were wide, filled with the thrill of discovery and the weight of what they had done. It was math. It was the secret. For centuries, humanity has been obsessed with making bigger guns and stronger shields. But while everyone else was looking at armor, we were looking at vibrations. "The galaxy doesn't know," Grace said, turning to face her crew. "The other races, the Vykeen, the Korvax, they rely on brute force. They build thick walls and shoot heavy rocks. They think that because our ships look simple, we are weak." Roy looked at his captain. "But we aren't weak. We are hiding this. Why?" "Because power is dangerous," Grace replied. "If the Galactic Council knew that a science vessel like this one could dissolve a battleship with a sound wave, they would never let us leave our solar system. They would bomb Earth from orbit just to make sure we never shared the secret." Before Roy could respond, a flashing red light on his console began to blink. It was a rhythmic pulse, different from the alarm earlier. It was an incoming signal, but this wasn't a local transmission. The signal carrier wave was powerful and complex. "We have an incoming hail," Roy said, his voice tightening. "It's on a high-band frequency. It's not coming from the wreckage. It's coming from the outer system." "Put it on the screen," Grace commanded. The view screen flickered again. The static cleared, revealing a new figure. It was not a Vykeen. This being was tall, slender, and encased in elegant white armor that seemed to glow from within. The helmet was featureless, a smooth oval of gold. Roy gasped. "That is a sentinel. High-ranking. That represents the Galactic Council." The figure on the screen did not move its mouth, but a synthesized melodic voice filled the bridge. It sounded like a choir speaking in unison. "Unidentified human vessel. We detected a massive energy spike and a total loss of a Vykeen dreadnought. Please explain your involvement." Grace stepped forward, her chin held high. "This is Captain Grace of the Earthship Aethelgard. We were intercepted by Overseer Vex. He fired upon us without warning. We defended ourselves." The sentinel tilted its head. "Defended?" "Our sensors indicate the dreadnought suffered a catastrophic structural failure. We detect no weapon discharge from your vessel. No missiles, no lasers, no plasma. How did you destroy a battleship with a science she?" P? We are not at liberty to discuss our engineering, Grace said coldly. Do not lie to the Council, the Sentinel's voice sharpened. That dreadnought had shielding capable of withstanding a nuclear blast. You did something to it. We are sending a fleet to secure this sector and detain your ship for questioning. Do not resist. The screen went black. Roy spun his chair around. Captain, they are sending a fleet. The Council has thousands of ships. We can't fight them all. We don't have to fight them, Thomas said, his fingers flying across his keyboard again. I captured the data from the pulse. I can modify it. The resonance frequency works on the Vykeen alloy, but the Council ships use a different composite. However, the principle is the same. If I can calibrate the emitter to match the atomic density of their hulls, can you do it? Grace asked. I need time, Thomas said. 10 minutes. Maybe 5. Time is something we do not have, Roy said, watching the radar. Look, they are dropping out of hyperspace now. On the view screen, space tore open. One after another, sleek silver ships appeared. They were beautiful and deadly, arranged in a perfect formation. There were 10 of them, surrounding the tiny Aethelgard. Their weapons glowed a soft blue, aimed directly at the human bridge. This is the Council Enforcement Fleet. The melodic voice returned. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Grace looked at Thomas. How long? Thomas was sweating, his eyes darting between lines of code. I'm trying to find the harmonic multiplier for their carbon fiber weave. It is complex. Just give me a minute. The lead Council ship began to charge its weapons. The blue glow grew brighter. Captain, Roy warned, if they shoot, we won't survive. We have no shields left after the resonance pulse drained our power. Grace watched the tactical display. They were trapped. They had revealed a fraction of their power, and now the giants of the galaxy were coming to crush them out of fear. She realized then that humanity could no longer hide in the shadows. Not after today. Thomas, Grace said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. Forget the precision. Don't target their hulls. Thomas looked up, confused. What do you mean? If I don't match the frequency, it won't work. Don't match the ship, Grace said. Match the space around the ship. Show them what happens when they threaten us. Thomas's eyes went wide as he understood. You want a subspace ripple? At that power level? It could destabilize the entire sector. Do it, Grace ordered. Thomas hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the 10 silver ships that filled the screen. Then he turned back to his console and typed a new command. Brace for impact. This is going to be rough. He slammed the enter key. The Aethelgard did not fire a beam this time. Instead, the ship emitted a shock wave of distortion that expanded in a perfect sphere around them. It washed over the debris of the Vykeen ship and continued outward. When the wave hit the Council ships, they didn't melt. They were pushed hard. The shock wave slammed into the silver vessels with the force of a hammer. The formation shattered. Ships were thrown backwards, tumbling end over end into the darkness. Their delicate systems overloaded, sparks flying across their hulls. On the bridge, the Aethelgard shook violently, sparks showering from the ceiling. Roy fought to keep the ship steady as gravity fluctuated wildly. Report, Grace yelled, grabbing the railing to stay upright. Direct hit on all targets. Thomas shouted over the roar of the engines. No damage to their hulls, but their sensors are blinded and their navigational computers are fried. They are drifting. On the screen, the 10 Council ships were dead in the water, floating helplessly. The lights on their hulls flickered and died. They were no longer a threat. They were just metal cans floating in the dark. Grace stood up straight and brushed a piece of hair from her face. She looked at the view screen, at the fleet that had come to capture them, now paralyzed by a single calculation. Open a channel to the lead ship, she said. Thomas nodded and patched the audio through. This is Captain Grace, she said, her voice echoing in the silence of the disabled enemy ships. We are leaving. If you follow us, the next pulse will not just disable your sensors. It will crack your worlds. Do not test us again. She nodded to Thomas. Cut the signal. Roy, get us out of here. Maximum speed. Roy didn't wait. He punched the coordinates for the jump gate and pushed the throttle to the limit. The Aethelgard leaped forward, leaving the paralyzed fleet and the shattered Vykeen wreckage behind. They were alone again, but the galaxy was watching now, and they were terrified. The stars outside the windows of the Aethelgard stretched into long, thin lines of light as the ship jumped into hyperspace. The shaking had stopped, and the red warning lights had finally turned off. The silence that returned to the bridge was different than before. It was not the silence of boredom. It was the heavy, electric silence that comes after a storm. Roy sat back in his chair, his hands resting on his knees. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. His heart was still beating fast, like a drum in his chest. We made it, he said, looking around the bridge as if he was surprised to see it still there. We actually made it. Thomas was slumped in his chair, staring at his screens. The black drive was smoking slightly, emitting a faint smell of ozone and burnt plastic. The drive is fried, he said quietly. I used too much power for the calculation. The resonance generator is burned out. We can't do that again. We don't need to do it again, Grace said from the center of the room. She walked over to the tactical map, looking at the red dots that represented the fleet they had left behind. Once is enough. Captain, I'm picking up a signal, Roy said suddenly, turning his attention back to the console. It's not a local signal. It's not even a military signal. It's on the Galactic Broadcast Network. It's on every channel. Grace narrowed her eyes. Put it on the main screen. The large view screen flickered and changed. Instead of the star-streaked view of hyperspace, a news feed appeared. It was being broadcast by a neutral news agency based in the core systems. A reporter with 4 eyes and green skin was speaking quickly, looking very worried. Breaking news from the edge of the galactic chart, the reporter said. Reports are coming in of a catastrophic incident involving a Vykeen dreadnought and a Galactic Council enforcement fleet. Early reports state that the dreadnought was completely destroyed, not by weapons, but by an unknown anomaly. Moments later, an entire fleet of Council vessels was disabled without a single shot being fired. The screen changed to show a shaky video recording. It was taken from a camera on a passing merchant ship. It showed the Aethelgard, a small blue and white ship, sitting silently in the dark. Then, a wave of distortion washed out from it. The massive Vykeen ships simply crumbled into dust. Then, the Silver Council ships were tossed around like toys in a bathtub. Roy watched the video with his mouth open. That's us, he whispered. The whole galaxy is seeing that. The reporter is calling it a gravity event, Thomas said, reading the text crawling at the bottom of the screen. But look at the comments. The experts are confused. They are saying it's impossible. They are saying the physics don't make sense. Grace smiled coldly. Let them be confused. Fear is a better shield than steel. Suddenly, the broadcast was interrupted. The screen went black for a second, and then a new symbol appeared. It was the golden seal of the Galactic High Council. A voice came through the speakers, calm but trembling slightly. Attention Earth vessel Aethelgard, the voice said. This is High Chancellor Valeries of the Galactic Council. Cease your flight immediately. We acknowledge your demonstration of power. We request an emergency diplomatic session. Do not jump away. We mean you no harm. Grace looked at Thomas and Roy. They are scared, she said. The Chancellor himself is calling us. That never happens. What should we do? Roy asked. We can't fight the whole council. They have thousands of ships. Grace walked to the front of the bridge and looked straight into the camera. Open the channel, she told Thomas. Thomas nodded and pressed a button. This is Captain Grace of the Aethelgard, she said, her voice strong and clear. We are not interested in a diplomatic session where we are treated like criminals. We were attacked by the Vykeen. We defended ourselves. Then the council tried to capture us. We defended ourselves again. We are not the aggressors here. There was a pause on the other end. When the Chancellor spoke again, his tone was much softer. Captain Grace, please. We did not know. The Vykeen told us you were pirates. We see now that they lied. The power you possess, the ability to dismantle matter with sound, it is beyond anything we have ever encountered. We must understand it. For the safety of the galaxy. Thomas leaned toward his microphone. You don't want to understand it. You want to steal it. But you can't. It's not just a weapon. It is the key to the universe. And we will not let you use it to control others. We are not asking to steal, the Chancellor said quickly. We are asking for peace. We want to offer a treaty. We will recognize Earth as a major power. We will give you a seat on the Council. We will lift all restrictions on your ships and your trade. We only ask that you do not use that resonance on us. Grace looked at Roy. She raised an eyebrow. Roy shook his head, grinning. A seat on the Council? Major power status? A week ago, they wouldn't even let us dock at their stations to buy fuel. People change when they are, afraid, Grace said. She turned back to the screen. Chancellor Valeris, we accept your offer for peace. But we have conditions. Name them, the Chancellor replied. First, Grace said, the dead zone and all sectors we have charted are now human territory. No non-human ship may enter these zones without our permission. If you cross the line, we will assume you are hostile. Agreed, the Chancellor said instantly. The sector is yours. Second, Grace continued, you will leave Earth and our colonies alone. No more inspections, no more security checks. Our ships are free to go anywhere. Agreed, the Chancellor repeated. You have our word. And third, Grace said, her voice dropping to a whisper that made everyone lean in. Do not ask us how we did it. The secret stays with us. If we ever find out you are trying to reverse engineer our technology, we will consider it an act of war. There was a long silence. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. We accept your terms, Captain Grace. A delegation will be sent to your ship to sign the papers within the hour. Welcome to the galactic stage. The screen went blank. Roy let out a loud cheer and slapped the console. Did you hear that? We won! We just told the council to back off, and they listened. Thomas was laughing, a relieved, happy sound. They are terrified, Roy. They think we are wizards. They think we can rewrite the laws of physics with a thought. They don't know it was just a math problem. Grace allowed herself a small smile. It doesn't matter if it is magic or math. What matters is that they respect us. For centuries, humanity has been the small kid on the playground. Today, we just beat up the bully. She walked over to the window and looked out at the streaking stars. Set a course for the rendezvous point, Roy. Let's go sign this treaty. And then let's go home. I think I've had enough excitement for a lifetime. Aye, Captain, Roy said. Course plotted. Engines at full power. The Aethelgard flew through the void of hyperspace, no longer a tiny, weak science vessel. It was a symbol of a new era. The galaxy had changed forever. The humans were no longer just another species. They were the keepers of a secret that could shake the stars. And as they sped toward the diplomatic meeting, Grace knew one thing for sure. Humanity would never be underestimated again. The silence of the bridge was peaceful again, but it was a different kind of peace now. It was the silence of respect. The Aethelgard floated near the agreed-upon coordinates, waiting for the diplomatic shuttle to arrive. Outside the window, the stars looked the same as they always did, but everything else had changed. Roy sat at his console, watching the radar closely. "They are approaching, Captain," he announced. "It is a small shuttle, no weapons. They are following our instructions to the letter." Grace stood by the viewport, looking out at the darkness. She had changed into her formal dress uniform. It was clean and pressed, with shiny metals on the chest. "Let them in, Roy. Open the main hangar bay doors." "Aye, Captain," Roy said. He pressed the buttons to guide the alien shuttle in. Thomas stood near the science station. He had spent the last hour scrubbing his data drives. There was no trace left of the secret frequency calculations. He had double-checked everything. "The drive is completely wiped, Captain," he said. "Even if they board us and take the computer apart, they will only find standard star charts." "Good work," Grace said. "They are coming for a treaty, not a technology transfer. We must keep it that way." A few minutes later, the bridge doors slid open. A small group of aliens walked in, surrounded by the ship's security guards. Leading the group was High Chancellor Valeris. In person, he was taller than he looked on the screen. He wore flowing robes of white silk, and his face was grave. Behind him were two aides carrying large digital cases. Grace turned to face them. She did not bow. She stood straight and tall. "Chancellor," she said simply. Valerius stopped in front of her. He looked older and more tired than he had during the transmission. He looked around the bridge of the Aethelgard, his eyes lingering on the simple controls. "Captain Grace," he said, "it is an honor to meet you in person." "Welcome aboard," Grace replied. "We are ready to sign." Valerius nodded slowly. He signaled to one of his aides, who stepped forward and opened a digital case. Inside was a transparent tablet glowing with golden text. "The Galactic Council has already ratified the agreement," Valerius said. "As of this moment, the sector known as the Dead Zone is recognized as human sovereign territory. Earth is granted status as a Level 1 civilization. All trade sanctions are lifted." Grace took the tablet. She read the words carefully. Roy and Thomas watched her, holding their breath. It looked perfect. It was everything they had risked their lives for. "I assume you have added the clause we discussed?" Grace asked, looking up at the alien leader. Valerius hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Yes, the clause stating that the Earth vessel Aethelgard is not required to share its technological specifications. The Council respects the need for state secrets." Grace signed her name on the screen with a stylus. She handed it back to Valerius, and he signed beneath her name. "It is done," Valerius said. He lowered his voice so only Grace and her officers could hear. "I must ask, Captain, not to break our agreement, but for my own peace of mind, what exactly did you do to the Vykeen ship? Our scientists have looked at the sensor logs 1,000 times. We see a wave, but we do not understand the physics. It appears you bent gravity itself." Grace looked at him. Her expression was neutral. "Chancellor, you have your treaty. You have your safety. Does it matter how we did it?" "It matters because the galaxy is terrified," Valerius admitted. "They are calling humanity the sleeping giants. They think you have been hiding weapons of mass destruction for centuries. If they knew it was something else—" "It is not a weapon," Grace said firmly. "It is an understanding. You look at space as something to be conquered with force. We look at it as a puzzle to be solved. We solved a piece of the puzzle that you haven't even looked for yet." Valerius seemed disappointed but accepting. He bowed his head. "Perhaps one day, when trust is established, you will teach us." "Perhaps," Grace said, "but not today." The Chancellor and his aides did not stay long. They had what they wanted: peace and a promise of safety. They were eager to leave the Aethelgard, to get away from the mysterious human ship that could destroy fleets with a sound. As soon as they left, the ship felt lighter. "Did we do the right thing?" Thomas asked once the aliens were gone. "Lying to them about being able to rewrite physics?" "We didn't lie," Grace said with a small smile. "We just let them believe what they wanted to believe. They think we are gods. That is better than them knowing we are just very good at math." Roy laughed. "So, what now? Do we go back to being explorers?" Grace walked to the center of the bridge. She touched the back of her chair. "Yes, we have a job to do. The dead zone is ours now. We need to chart it. We need to understand it better than anyone else. And we need to make sure that no one ever tries to take it from us again." She looked at her crew. Thomas was already back at his station, eager to get back to work. Roy had his hands on the controls, ready to fly. "Set a course for the outer rim, Roy," Grace ordered. "Let's see what else is out there." "Course plotted, Captain," Roy said. "Engaging engines." The Aethelgard turned away from the meeting point. It moved gracefully, slipping into the darkness of the uncharted sectors. Behind them, the Galactic Council would go back to its politics, and the Vykeen would rebuild their ships. But they would never forget the name Aethelgard. They would look at the edge of the chart and see the line drawn in the stars. They would know that on the other side of that line, humanity was watching. "Thomas," Grace said softly as the stars began to streak by. "About that frequency. Could you really use it again?" Thomas looked up from his screen. "The drive is fried, Captain. And without it, I can't generate the power. But give me a few months in a lab with the right equipment, I think I could make a portable version. Maybe even smaller." Grace nodded. "Get to work on that when we get home. Just in case." "In the meantime," Roy said, grinning, "let's find some more interesting rocks." "I'm bored again." The bridge crew laughed. It was a good sound. The Aethelgard disappeared into the deep black, carrying its secret knowledge like a hidden treasure. They were no longer just explorers. They were the guardians of the edge, and the galaxy would never be the same.